I see we're looking at the global picture again, as opposed to being specific.
So you've got agreement here.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I'm actually, I'm just kind of waiting. What I would do is say, well, I mean, I have to do specifically is to stand up and go back to your seat. That would be an easy thing to do. Hey, all right. I was kind of hoping that they might come up with this idea.
He used global, so he
Yeah.
chunked up.
Yeah. Well, here's what I want you to notice is, I mean, what I want to demonstrate a couple things was we use kind of a bunch of the patterns, using consequence, using metaframes, using applying criteria to itself, going above.
Your report skills are phenomenal. You kept getting in there. It was worth not being report with you.
Yeah.
It was worth for your part of that.
Yeah. Well, and which, by the way, is another thing I think was important. And remember I was saying it, there was a point when he couldn't do it to me anymore and he was kind of making token attempts. That was the kind of thing I was referring to. But it's not my rapport skills, it's just doing NLP. It's just being able to look at the bigger picture and act specifically based upon what you see. But yeah, I mean, and by the way, so I want you to notice is that it's when you have these levels of patterns, it also gives you, I mean, this thing becomes kind of obvious. Once you know what's going on there, then you can play with it. Then you can use it instead of having to be stuck yourself in the middle of it. And I think that's one of the real neat things about being able to do this. Also, it's nice about having it on the external when you have two people that are doing it precisely just to keep their... See, the interesting thing about this is they were just trying to keep their belief systems. That was what they were trying to do. They didn't even have an outcome. They didn't even have a goal. So really, the whole issue here was two people just trying to, you know, it's like, the basic criterion for both of them, as far as I can tell, was one thing only: don't give in. How are we going to interface this system in a way that they don't have to compromise their position? I mean, really, if you want to call a spade a lot of times, that's exactly what's happening when you get into arguments with people. The only reason that they're still arguing is because if they change their position, then they feel like they've given in. How do I allow it so that somebody can maintain their position? I mean, like, he was easy because was he flexible enough to be specific? Now, in order to maintain his position, he had to be specific. Whereas if we just said, be specific, he has to give himself, it's not validating himself, his criteria, it's violating it. Do you understand how that works? He is showing flexibility. He is showing me that he can do this by being specific. And therefore, he's validating his flexibility, his ability to see the big picture by doing that, which is now no longer a violation of his personal integrity of his process or of his belief. It's actually an expression of it. And I think that's part of what rapport is all about. And when we talk about rapport, by the way, rapport to me is more than just body mirroring. Obviously, I couldn't body mirror either of them. But what I can do is I can pace their beliefs, I can pace their criteria, I can pace their thought process. I can pace their gestures. And what they were doing here with their gestures is something you will see all the time. And it's really interesting to take this person's content and just go, well, actually, he's just saying this. And literally throw it up into that person's accessing position. And it's like, oh, yeah, I understand. Because sometimes those will be the difference.
So is metaframe just getting each of them to agree upon something in the belief?
No, metaframe, that's a function of the metaframe. That's one of its purposes. But a metaframe is to just comment on what is happening here. Like if I metaframe, one of my metaframes was just simply, oh, your only problem is that you're chunking small and you're chunking big. It's not that he's a wimp. It's just that he's thinking differently from you. So what I'm doing is I comment on something that's happening here that they haven't noticed that is above the content of their process.
To get them to agree on it?
Well, they may or may not agree on it, but they'll have to validate it. How are they going to, I mean, he can't, neither of them can break out of it because he is going to chunk big or he is going to chunk little. And the double bind of it is, in order to prove me wrong, he has to do what I want him to do anyway. I mean, that makes it a therapeutic double bind. If I say, the only reason you're disagreeing with him is because you're chunking little, and he goes, bullshit, it's just because he's a wimp, I'll say, well, prove it to me. Chunk big and let's see. You know? Because now, in order to prove me wrong, he has to do what I want him to do anyway. He has to do something therapeutic to their relationship. I don't care. It's just sleight of mouth to me. So if he has to prove me wrong by doing something I want him to do anyway, I go, great. You know what? You're good. I mean, I can validate him as a person. I'm glad that you had the ability to stand up like a man to me and prove me wrong. Doesn't it feel good and manly to be chunking big? Now what's he, I got him. What can he say? What can he do? Consequence.
I noticed that it was very important for him to be a master practitioner. Yet he was ready to walk out. And he was ready to walk out because he couldn't deal with what was going on, which was kind of wimpy, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, no. He was just being, it was more of the feminine frame of thinking. I agree. No, I'm playing along with you. And I agree. So he's saying I could leverage the master practitioner criteria. He gave me somewhere to go at least. Let me check the time frame here. Let's do this for a moment. I want to take a little stand-up break here. So you can, we kind of watch doing this. Before we break, let me ask you if there are any particular questions. There's a lot of things you could notice about what we were doing and we could say about it. Let me ask if there was any particular questions that you had about doing any of this. So why did I do this, or was one of them a particular pattern, or did I not do a particular pattern that you would want to hear how it would have been done? Just before we leave this. Yes?
For me, could you say something about apply to self?
Yeah. Apply to self is when he goes, it's really important for me to be flexible. Okay? So when I'm applying it to self, I can say, is your belief, remember when I said, is his belief that he needs to be flexible, is he really flexible about that belief? That's applying it to himself, to say, this belief that you need to be flexible is not a very flexible belief. That's taking the belief and applying it back onto itself. When he goes, I think it's important to be a man, I can say, is it really manly? Does a man really have to be so damn concerned about being a man? Most of the people that I know that really are men don't worry about it. They just be it. They don't have to worry about other people. The only reason that you have to challenge somebody else is if you're concerned about your own manliness. So that would be applying it back onto itself. I take the belief and show how it's a violation, in a sense, of the criteria that the person is trying to, preserve. Okay.
The definition of metaframe other than the words here.
On there, yeah. And by the way, I appreciate that it's. I wish I could have a real specific, clear definition of it. It's primarily a way of putting a belief around the ongoing context, which is not. It's about the relationship between the people, not about their beliefs. So a metaframe is typically about the relationship between the people that are right there.
Getting it then to an identity level.
That's right.
as opposed to
Exactly.
whether someone is experienced or
Right. So what she's saying is she's saying what's kind of also seems to be going above, you're going up, you're going to a more identity level in a way. And sometimes you can see a metaframe is where I'm saying that all of their behavior can be interpreted inside of a particular frame that changes its meaning. So the example I was giving the negotiators in here was of Freud's idea of transference. If I can say, the only reason you're having a problem is that there's a negative transference here. I mean, what I've done is I put this frame around it that's completely outside of anything that has to do with their argument. And how is he going to argue against it? If he starts saying, no, it isn't, I'd say, here, there's another example of negative transference. You're only disagreeing with me because you have a transference to me on a negative transference.
that he's transferred his feelings from this person to the person he gave.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, so it's a comment about something he's doing. It's a comment about the process of what's happening, the relationship of what's happening, as opposed to the content. Some of these sleight of mouth patterns, I have to admit that the definitions can be made clear, and it's one of the things I'm constantly searching for. Sometimes the best way to do it is just to do it by example. For example, if I wanted to metaframe our context, I'd say, and I would say, well, the only reason that you're having trouble with this is because it involves a process that people don't do very much. And it's hard to define it because in order to understand something, you already have to have a reference for it. So what that does is it puts a frame it's a different frame. It's not, well, because the definition isn't good enough or you don't understand or we can't do it. It's just we're going to saying it's a way of thinking that most people aren't very familiar with. So notice I'm talking about a process level.
Way for the individual.
Right.
Do the Virginia Satir super reasonable? Wouldn't they use it a lot?
Yeah. You know who did it a lot? I'll tell you one person. Jesus did it a lot. He had a good metaframe where he said, people that are of God understand what I'm saying. If you don't understand the only reason you don't understand what I'm saying is because you're not of God. I mean, if you were of God, you'd understand what I'm saying. How are you going to argue with it? I mean, as soon as you start arguing against it, you're putting your own foot in your mouth, because he put this frame around that says, you have to argue with me because you are not from the Spirit here. If you were from the Spirit, you wouldn't be arguing. So again, now person can't really do anything in order to get out of that, because if they try to argue, it's just more proof of what he said. I mean, it's not going to get you out of it. It'll get you in deeper. So it's kind of a metaframe around, it's about a relationship, you know, as I'm saying, because you're not from God. Now, I was actually saying it on a more positive level. I was sort of almost saying the same thing when I said, since people don't think this way that much, it's hard for them to understand it, because it's not a natural function. Well, that's like saying, well, if you thought this way, you'd understand it. You know, so if you thought this way all the time, it'd be easy to understand. And the reason that you need to get the definitions for things like metaframe is because they're the most important ones. They're the ones that people don't automatically always have intuitions about, which means that's where the most learning will take place. So that's positive metaframe.
Did you see the film Brown Eyes Door?
No.
It's hard to talk about it, but this woman did that. She created a whole thing about prejudice around brown eyes and blue eyes, and she created a belief, and not just with kids, but with adults. And then the next day she switched around and turned around the other way.
Yeah.
She was incredible how she...
Yeah, and that's some of the kind of things that we're talking about here with the, I mean, that's the power of sleight of model. Now,
Okay. So anyway, two people go out to dinner very often, and they start out, and they're like this, straight up. Okay? General. Okay? As they get into rapport, what do?
Lean forward.
Lean forward. As they begin to lean forward. Did you ever notice Robert's always forward? I mean, he's not up here too very
it's just
often.
because I'm always looking very specifically at the big picture.
Right. Anyway, as you watch people, as they become more and more specified, one of the things that they're going to do is they're going to tend to move their bodies together. Okay. Now that becomes a very good clue as you're starting to do this kind of pattern. Where are they? Are they up here? Or are they here? Try playing with the rapport patterns and some of the patterns Robert has been going over this weekend. Start out up here, okay, as the other person is specified, and see what happens. See how long that conversation can go on in this postural base.
It's kind of like also the thing I was saying about if you go in to do a negotiation or consultation, and you notice that both people are, if they're both like this, they probably disagree about big issues. If they're more like this, disagreeing, they're probably about the smaller pieces, which I think can kind of give you some interesting insight into assessing an audience or a group or a conflict before you even get started.
Which is kind of a nice thing to have. Okay, because if you can pre-assess before you get in there. Okay, a lot of you who, for example, are into massage. Okay, how many of you do massage in here? Or get massage? Much larger number, yes.
Jump up.
Okay. Think about how people approach each other for massage. I mean, I've seen people come into a masseuse and go, masseuse? Is that the right word? Massage therapist.
massage person.
You're in Florida now, we're licensed. You come into a massage therapist and they say, yes, I've got this problem. Okay? Give them the global problem. And then as they start to talk about the muscles that are being affected, very often you see the movement more specified. There's a lot of different applications to this. The business ones are real important, real good. So, you want to go over this stuff or you want to get somebody up here?
Well, I want to do both.
You're probably not going to have enough time.
No, we can do them both together. What we want to do is to show how you would work this. We can do them at the same time. It's easy. Just put your ears over here and your eyes up here.
Well, by the way, Robert invited me to come up. That's not on the tape, so just so people out there know.
Yeah, one of the things I want to do is to go over, when you're dealing with beliefs, there are a couple of basic belief issues that you run across a lot. On here, we've got our hierarchy that we've been dealing with up until this point. We have identity, beliefs, capabilities, specific behaviors, and environment. One of the things that I've done is to show that typically when people have something, an issue regarding their identity, kind of in between identity and belief, you get a sense of worthlessness. Worthless is usually a statement about your identity. Hopeless is usually a statement about, well, even if I do it, nothing's going to make any difference anyway. It isn't really possible. Helpless is usually a statement about your capabilities and specific behaviors. So very often what you're going to find is if you work with people, whether it's, again, in health or in business or whatever, if somebody doesn't believe, or if a student, say, doesn't believe that it's possible to perform the function that they're supposed to do, they're going to be hopeless. And what difference does it make? Somebody might believe that the goal is possible, but that they don't have what it takes to get it. So therefore you would feel helpless. If it's possible to get there, but I can't do it, I don't have the capability or the behaviors, then I'm going to feel helpless. If I believe that the goal is possible, I even have the capabilities to do it, but I don't deserve it because I'm not worthwhile or something as a person, then you get worthless. And of course, the interesting thing is that they all tend to feed on each other. Helpless might make you feel you're helpless because you're worthless, and that makes you hopeless, and da-da-da-da. But a lot of times what you'll find is that it'll tend to focus on one of these elements. That the major issue is not really the person is hopeless, but they go, well, it's possible, but not for me. Or, it's possible, but I don't really, why me? Why should I be able to have this? What did I do to deserve it, to earn it? And over here, I just wanted to kind of, this is sort of a modification of a model that Joe Yeager made called, where he identifies some basic elements of change. And I think beliefs will also relate to these, and it's important to know where you're working with somebody. Somebody has a particular belief issue. Like, for example, in our argument, our negotiation between the two folks here, I think that the question was less how to than it was wanting to. And typically, this is the order that I'm going to go in. I want to first know what it is that we've got to do. If you don't know what to do, or what it is that you're trying to accomplish, you can't evaluate whether you want to do it or you know how to do it. So first you've got to get a goal. Then the question is, do you want that goal? In other words, does this person really want to be able to accomplish this? Do they want to be healthy? Do they want to learn? Do they want to be successful in business? Then do they know how to? And finally, are their beliefs set up in an appropriate feedback loop so they get a chance to? And we were kind of addressing all of those issues along here. That is the belief affecting you know what to do, you want to do it, and you know how to do it, but something kind of stops you from getting enough of an opportunity to let all the pieces fall together. And so each of these, I think, is something that will also help you sort out, just like these, the kind of issues that you might be working with when you're addressing a belief issue. Now, what I'd like to do is synthesize these things together with the sleight of mouth things we've been learning together.
And before we do it,
Yeah.
there's one other model on there
Yeah.
that's worthwhile taking a look at. When you're thinking about sleight of mouth, one of the things to think about is You're changing a belief to another belief, hopefully. The question becomes, how do you get there? All of you know who Milton Erickson is? Okay, Milton talked about confusion in a very interesting way. Now, what I'd like you to think about for a second is just go back in your own mind and think about a time when you've changed a belief. For example, if you've changed religions, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends. Now notice what happened. Okay. At one point you have a very firm belief about something. Okay. How did you change the belief? Was there a period of confusion?
When you weren't sure what to believe.
Now sleight of mouth does something really marvelous. How many of you had the experience of being confused?
Aha! Changes of beliefs occurring.
Okay. And then went at some point and found one of the patterns that you went, I got that. Okay. And we're able to take that pattern in, take in a new belief. So as you go back to thinking about a belief that you had that you changed, think about what the level of confusion had to be for you to change it. Robert happens to be a master at getting people over detailed and specified until what begins to happen? Confusion, trance. Okay. 7 plus or 2 minus chunks. Okay. He does that real well. I mean, think back to the beginning of the seminar. Okay. How many patterns have you gone through mentally?
I'm sure we'll get a different count from everybody.
Like what happened yesterday? Okay. See, that's why we're going to have this tape set available for purchase.
Oh, thank you. My confusion has ended.
That's right.
Was blind, but now
Okay,
I
but think about it. Think about sales. Think about some of the other things, okay, where people change beliefs. You know, Larry has been a salesman for years and years. Damn good one. For large companies. He goes out and he convinces people, okay, to end up with his belief system called what? Buy. Think about Tony Robbins. Ultimate salesman. How many of you have been to Tony? Walking on water or whatever that is? Okay. I mean, Tony goes through a whole process. I sat in a sales process with him. Okay. Got people really, really overloaded. Okay. Got them totally confused. Okay. And handed them a belief. He went, okay, and almost everybody went, hey, yeah. Threw in a new belief. Said NLP is going to change my life. Now, Tony's real good at that. How many of you can remember a time when you thought NLP was a lot of garbage and then changed? No.
How many of you haven't changed yet?
So anyway, we wanted to throw that few pieces in there.
Just to confuse you.
No, to clarify the issue.
Which is actually confusing at a lower level.
But now that we've switched sides, why don't we elicit some data and then pick somebody and go?
Yeah. What we want to do is to find out, how would we go about synthesizing together all the various elements of the things that we've been talking about here into an individual change process. So what we're curious about is just finding if there was somebody who had a belief that you would like to try to defend against us. No, that you would like to that you would like to get some more choices about, shall we say, in which would be willing to be a demonstration subject, and what that belief, we'd like to get some examples of what kind of beliefs those might be.
Oh, I have a belief that I'm an underachiever and I always will be.
Okay.
Do you want that on tape?
I
Nationwide?
I think I could manage it.
Okay, here's one.
I have one. I work with a lot of men. I have this.
Speak up so the microphone gets it.
I work with a lot of men, and I have this belief.
That's a
that
problem in and of
I
itself.
it's a problem. But I'm not allowed to
Not allowed to be successful, okay. Yes?
I have a belief that I don't have a good business head.
That's true. No, you're just a woman. No, actually. So, no, okay, so yeah, right.
Easy for you to say.
Okay, anybody else?
So, that I don't have a good business head. I think that's good.
Yeah, I do too, yeah. I'm not going to touch, I can't sing. Okay, let's do the business one, just simply because it's going to be one that most people have at one level or another. How many of you have, I'm not a good business person on some level?
I don't have
On some level.
By the way, now listen, though, there's actually the difference is I don't have a good head for business. Now, by the way, listen to the different levels of belief. I am an
Start
underachiever.
walking up.
Yeah, come on up. I am an underachiever. That's more identity. I can't sing. That's specific behavior. I'm sure you'd probably get to identity eventually with that one somewhere. Okay, here, well, I work with men, and I am not allowed to succeed. That's belief and capability. It's not I am this or that. But my guess is you might find lurking behind that one.
Yes, you're not allowed to lurk over
a
there.
worthwhile issue. So and that's kind of the thing to think about here, too.
Or women are not worthwhile.
So here we have a belief, I don't have a good head for business. Let's just first do our thing. How do you know that you don't?
Because I know I got a lot of training, I have a lot of knowledge, I have a lot of education, and I'm not rich.
So I have all of this background experience, but I don't have a particular result. What causes that?
Would any of you like to know what rich is? Because, I mean, I'm curious about that.
Just once.
I don't know that now that I've said it. Not to have to work so hard to make as much money as I do, I think would be more accurate. Still vague, right? I don't know what rich is. Rich is always more money than I have.
That might be a what to issue. And the other thing is, if somebody can't define rich, does it maybe that it's not a content-specific thing anyway? Because she says if it's always more than I have, then maybe it's the belief about that since I'm not rich and I don't have a good business head, then obviously whatever money I have is not good enough because I'm not. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I was really good, I would feel like I had enough money, but since I'm not good, the amount of money I have is not enough. I want to finish just the first part of the elicitation, then we can specify some of these. What causes this?
What causes what?
The fact that you have all this training and don't have the kind of wealth, don't have a good business head. What makes it be that way?
Well, because I see people who know less than I do, I think, that's my opinion, who package themselves and market themselves and put things together that the public buys that I could do just as well, if not better than they do, and I'm not doing it and they are.
Okay, but see, that's interesting information, but my question is, what makes you not do it even though they are? You have all the background.
Beats the hell out of me.
That's probably the most accurate statement. I'll bet it does.
And it makes
whatever
it worse
is.
that I have all this training and all this education, and it still beats the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Something
See,
I'm not doing, something I don't see.
So one of the issues I'd want to know is it a want to issue? Do you want to do this?
Market myself, package myself.
Sometimes that's called being a whore.
You take much.
Well, by the way,
No.
notice what Ed just did is a redefine. He said that, and he made it in a very strong statement in order to elicit a resorting. Okay, so I think that's
Small trance.
Does not compute with being a whore. There's a little bit of I should.
But in other words, so what Ed's saying is if you package yourself and did this, you wouldn't feel like, see, here's the question I want to know. If you had a good business head, would you have to package yourself and market yourself? Or if you had a good business head, would riches come to you? That's the relationship I'm hearing. What if that belief is the case?
Say that again.
If you really had a good business head, would you need to market yourself, package yourself in
No,
those
come to think of it, I probably wouldn't. I would just be more intelligent.
See, and I think that's what she's saying, is that's more, Ed was checking ecology on the part of want to because, well, am I selling myself in a negative sense? And I'm also wondering, because I've heard these kind of beliefs before in my day.
Really?
Yeah, that, in other words, that there's a double bind, which is if I was really good at business, I wouldn't have to market myself. People would be beating down, they'd be beating a path to my door if I had a better mousetrap.
Oh, yeah, they would.
Yeah, see, listen to that.
Fuck up mouse traps. Mouse traps, too. God knows what else.
So,
Radiating.
so is it that, is the issue that you really don't market, package yourself? So that's what I'm wondering is, she said the cause was I don't market myself, I don't package myself. And I'm saying, well, is that really what you believe the cause is? Is it good business to market yourself and package yourself?
If I wanted to.
If I wanted to. Do you want to?
I find it hard to answer that question because I believe that I don't know how to. So if I knew how to do it, I could do it and see if I liked it. Am I answering
So
the
you can
question?
track her down this way. Watch how often she's going back and forth. Okay, how to, want to, how to, want to.
Yeah.
My question still comes back to, do you want to? Is that what you want?
To some extent, yeah, but not wholeheartedly.
Okay.
I want to be able to. Now, whether I actually follow through, but I don't believe I have the skills to do it. Or I miss something.
So now she's talking about capabilities. Do I have the skills? Do I know what to do? She's kind of focusing here on a how-to, on a capability level. Do I believe that I have the capability? So one of the things that Ed and I could do is to challenge that. I thought you said that you've been to all these courses, you see other people that have less intelligence than you doing all this stuff.
Not really.
What do you mean you
men.
can't not get?
Some of them are women.
Oh, so you have less intelligence than all men and some women?
No. But there is something, I think, that I don't know that they do.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it is.
No, I can't do that. Okay. Now, isn't that interesting? What do you think we ought to do with that one? There's a secret.
That they know and you don't know.
Or that I don't know I know.
Yeah, that might be more of it. What's the difference between you and these other people?
See, if you look out here, you see a lot of people that know the secret. That's how they could afford to come to this workshop.
Me, I had to pull a tooth and sell the filling.
Oh, wow.
There's another thing that I'd like to do, and I think it's important in terms of giving you a general strategy for using sleight of mouth. There's a couple other things that we would both want to know, because we could take this, like Ed says, what do you want to do with it? We could sleight of mouth elements. But I think there's two other things we want to do. Number one is, I'd like to find out what belief would you need. See, because you're not up here to necessarily learn how to do this. I believe that from the experience and the observations that you've made and all those programs, you've been exposed to the same things. You've got to have the information. So it seems to me that it's a matter of belief, not of how to. I mean, that's what we're doing here anyway. So that's my metaframe. But it seems to me that there's a belief that you would need in order to make this work. And I guess that's the thing that I'd like to find out is, what belief would you need in order to be able to do this? What would you need to believe?
One thing I need to believe is that I know.
You need to know one thing, though. You've got to be careful because you're liable to get it.
I know.
Because he said one thing is.
I need to believe that I had a better understanding of the business world.
Okay, so she needs to believe that she had a better understanding of it. What else?
Well, I know that I know how to organize things, but I need to believe that I know how to organize myself or whatever. Maybe I need to know what's necessary.
Okay. Now, are we beginning to start to chunk up or down?
Okay. Now, what I'm curious, what are some of we were talking yesterday about positive beliefs that people have. What is something that doesn't relate to this issue, but it's a belief that you do believe about yourself that's positive? What's some resource that you do have?
Not that one. Public television.
I believe I'm creative, and I believe I'm weird.
Okay.
And I consider that unorthodox, willing
Okay.
to experiment.
Okay, now, here becomes, already now we have a couple of things going on here. Listen to what this information gets us. Number one is, instead of just sitting around and trying to buffet around some limiting belief, by putting it into these contexts, it gives us some places to go. What beliefs do you need? Well, that tells us where we need to track to. Now there's another interesting thing. She says, I'm creative and I'm weird. Now, if that is an identity statement, okay, I want to be able to be capable of doing, organizing things for business. Do creative and weird people, are they successful in business? Well,
Are they?
well, but I think when you start hearing here is you wonder, well, do you have to be organized and very hard-headed and very, so on and so forth to be successful? And whether it's true or not, I happen to agree with you as far as the belief is. Maybe the belief I want to make is that her creativity and weirdness is what can make her successful in business.
Yeah, but I think we need to find out whether, can you be creative and weird and successful in business?
Well, I had to ask. I'm not sure.
Would you tend to go more towards no or more towards yes?
Probably more towards no.
Probably.
See, because now what we have is, she says, I don't have a good business head. What kind of head she does have that she says is, I've got a creative and weird head. Now, that's the question is being creative and weird going to assist or going to interfere with having a good business head? If a good business head is a creative and weird head, then you got one. You already so that belief is no longer.
So I must not believe that a creative and weird head is a good thing to have for business.
Kind of looks that way.
The reason that Ed said that is just.
Besides which, I almost fell off the stool on no.
Yes.
So notice what we're doing here is part of the reason I'm asking about some of the beliefs. What are resource beliefs? Number one, I might find right there that there's already conflict between identity and capability. She was saying this is really a how-to. This is really a capability. And this is an identity. This is who I am. I am creative and weird.
Now, how many of you would be willing to give up your identity to get a capability?
That's a businessman.
$3.80. Okay. How about you? Are you willing to give up your belief in creative and weird to become a businesswoman? Or to have a head for business, so to say?
If it has to be an either or, no.
Okay. But in your structure, is it either or?
Seems to be. I think there's a little hope that maybe it's not true, which is why I'm up here.
Yeah, there's a little hope.
Dollar.
How big?
Besides which, I've been told all my life I don't have a good head for business.
Remember, now we have, we were asking about what's the cause? It's the cause that's been beating her up.
How could I forget that?
That's what's been beating
Brainwashing.
her up. Okay, now, she's been told all her life, also tells us about representational systems. Now, it's that voice that we might want to have a little fun with Sleight. No! See, that's the question, is where do we want to use a sleight of mouth?
Like,
where would it be best used?
Like if you went...
I love to ruin internal dialogue.
Really?
If you went inside right now and listened to that voice, whose voice would it be?
It could be my father's, with a French accent.
What kind of things does it say?
What's the matter with you?
Yes.
Don't you know to do with your money? Did I tell you everything?
Okay. Now let's say we want to sleight of mouth that.
We get Richard Morales to do it in Spanish.
Where longer is he?
And by the way, notice it's like here we had a little hope. Here we have, notice is this, you know, we're kind of, if we've got this helpless, hopeless kind of a thing going on here, and probably it's like being a little person. When people talk about feeling small and stuff, usually it's kind of like a regression back to this particular time. Well, how could we sleight of mouth this thing with this voice, this father who's telling you, well, don't you know what to do with your money? I said, yeah, spend it. What would he say? I mean,
Oh, even if I said yes, spend it?
yeah.
Heavens to Murgatroyd.
I put the voice out there. I wanted to beat me up for a while.
That's your Irish mother.
No. My mother didn't have a lot to say about money. It was
I
just
believe you.
me. Oh, spend the money? No, no, no. After all the money I've made in my life, as long as I've worked, I should have a lot more to show for it.
That's what he says to you, that
Yeah,
you should
but with
have.
a French accent.
That's what he says to you, you should have more to
Yes.
show for it.
I'm a great disappointment.
Now we're getting,
I forgot that until just now.
by the way, now we're getting into worthless, disappointing. By the way, does your father have a lot of money?
I think so, but he's always been very secretive about how much money he has.
After we show him this tape, he won't be.
You think he's going to see this tape? No way.
Well, but see, what I'm hearing you're saying now, the reason I'm asking is a couple of other things, because now here's where you also get into the identity. She was saying these words. Remember when I said, what's your evidence? She said those words to me as if they were coming from her. These words aren't, that's not her evidence. That's the evidence with the father. Should have more money for all I've worked, and it's never going to be good enough, is it? She
Notice
doesn't
the
even know how
pronoun.
much he has. Because good enough compared to what? Yeah,
She doesn't know how much she wants.
right. Doesn't know what rich is.
And she will never be able to measure it.
She doesn't write, she doesn't know what it is.
And what if she did have money and was like her father? Do you want to be like your father? Would you want to
Do I
have
want to
his
be
head?
like him? No.
Okay. So, in other words, that's where you're getting, it's like if we take the belief, if you were rich and successful, would you be like your father?
Maybe so. And he's not very happy, and he worries about money constantly.
Does he have a good business head?
I think he probably does. I guess I believe he does.
So now I think you see what the issue is. Well, it's no wonder. It's like, remember somebody once telling me they wanted to lose weight. And I said, well, had you ever been thin? They said, oh yeah, I was a beauty queen in college. I'd like to look just like that. And these words actually came out of her mouth. Yeah, really, I want to look like I did when I didn't like myself. Oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that for you, you know. I'd be happy to make you not like yourself again. I mean, in other words, what she's saying is, I want to do something that violates a whole lot of things about me. Now, here, though, is where we can start to see where we can do the sleight of mouth things, to do the redefining. Is it really true that to have a good head for business, you have to worry about money, think like your father, and so on and so forth all the time?
Of course.
But of course.
Is that true? I mean, if your father was sitting right here, and we were talking to him, and I said, well, no, I think that a lot of the people that I know are successful in business are actually quite creative. In fact,
Well, he's creative, too.
Is he weird?
Hangs around in a Cuban neighborhood speaking French. Is that weird?
I guess he's pretty unorthodox, but when I say weird about myself and weird about him, they're different. He's internationally known for his creativity.
So, the question there, I mean, having all this stuff down, my question is the way that you are really make you not have a good head for business, or do you just have a different way of doing business? And if you had enough money, if you had the kind of money that you wanted to, and your father said, hey, you should have more money with all the amount that you've worked, what would you want to say back?
What would I want to say back? I don't really have a response. I would just...
Yeah. Okay, this is where sleight of
Now,
mouth comes to
if you
rescue.
did have a response, what would it be?
I have enough money for me. As I say it, it feels pretty lame, because I don't meet your standard, and I never will, because I'm not sure what it is.
Good.
I just know that I don't meet it.
Good. Now, is a business head equal to money?
Yeah, people who are good in business have a lot of money, or are they happy in what they're doing?
There's an inequity here. I don't know whatever. Say that again.
Said having a good business head, is that equal to having a lot of money?
It's-
Or to say Robert's statement,
Is a good person who has a good business head, are they happy in their business, or do they have money? Is somebody who's unhappy and constantly worrying about money and has a lot of it, are they a good business person? Or is there a person who's happy with what they're doing, is creative, and is expressing themselves and doing what they want to do? Is that person who's good?
so I have a friend of mine that closed up an advertising agency that was making millions of dollars and opened up a small shop. Okay? And he gets off on a small shop.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, he was making millions. Okay? But now he's happy. Now, which is good business head?
That combination.
Not for him.
Well, he's saying it doesn't have to be necessarily either or, and that's the purpose of the question is not for us to answer it, but for her to answer it, of course, to sort it, and that's what she's doing.
By the way, how many of you have noticed that Linda has a kinesthetic sort?
Because it's so subtle.
Yes.
Actually, it looks like a little bit going between auditory dialogue and kinesthetic, being happy versus doing what you're told, what you're supposed to.
That's the, I know what I prefer, but there's some part of me that still feels like it's a little wrong. I'd much rather be happy at what I'm doing. Because if I have had jobs where I've made more money and I have been miserable.
See, one of the things I think is important is the problem thing is, tell me, she actually has a good one for sleight of mouth. Because what I find is the problem is she doesn't know what to say back to her father. This is, I mean, the thing your father's giving you is just a bunch of words. It's bullshit. What I'm seeing you say, I mean, I'm saying this in a strong way now in order to make a point, but what I'm hearing you doing is saying you don't know how to, see, verbal models of the world have their own reality. You can feel differently. Remember Peggy was saying, where your internal dialogue tells you something and you know it's not logical, but you still have that feeling? Well, if it's verbal, and that's where the message is coming in, this is what sleight of mouth is perfectly designed for. Let's do a little bit with this verbal thing. Remember he said, well, then you don't have enough money. And he said, well, on the one hand, I kind of feel like I do, and I prefer to be happy. Let's do some nice verbal skills for how you could respond to that. And, you know, what would be a good consequence? You know, why could you take a consequence? Well, thank God that I don't have all the money yet. I need to, or, you know, what would I have to learn from you, Dad?
And what would my purpose in life be? If I got it all now, it would all be over.
Oh, that's a good one. Both of those are good.
And you could also say, well, gee, you know, I find that the more money, Dad, have you ever found the more money that you have, the more you worry? So actually, I'm just trying to get the right balance of worry and happy, because if more money makes me worry more, I'd rather be here.
And besides that, if I get all that money, the government's going to take it.
That's for sure. I mean, we can redefine it. Well, it's not that I don't have
They can't
all
take
the
my
money or
happiness.
enough money.
They can't, they'll find a way to tax it.
It's not that I have less money, it's just that I'm satisfied with I don't have the same standards, I'm satisfied with less. It's not that I can't do it, it's that I'm not completely committed to getting more.
How
I mean,
about,
he might have a response back to that.
Yeah.
How
he
about
would.
also
I
if you
should
say
save
to
it
him-
more.
So he says you should save it more. So you say, well, Dad, do you think it's better business head to save money or invest it?
Both.
Oh, so I'm just investing more than you in myself. What do you say?
No, that one didn't fly.
Okay, well, why? Well, how didn't it not fly? That's what we want.
Investing in myself.
Isn't that good business? Dad, do you think I'm worthwhile enough to invest in?
because if I invest more in this, then I'll have more ability to go make more money.
I'm curious as to what he would say if you would say, am I worthwhile enough to invest in?
Me too.
What do you think he would say?
I think he would do one of two things. Either he wouldn't say anything, or he would say, what kind of a question is that?
So he would go to a metaframe. What would you answer him? So to me, it's probably the most important question. If you're telling me that it's not right to invest in myself, but I think I'm important enough to do that in, that seems to me to be a good use of my money. What good does it have to do to have money if I'm not using it for things that are important for me?
And things that'll prepare me for the future.
About the future, he would say, I am not a spring chicken anymore.
And that's true.
That's true.
See, and the thing, there's more we can do with the sleight of mouth, but the thing I think that makes it so perfectly designed for it is, what sleight of mouth is it says, sleight of mouth is like submodalities of the auditory system, the verbal system. You can make pictures bigger and brighter and distant and all that. Well, sleight of mouth is taking words and changing them around. And what I find a lot of times is the system that you have the least facility with in responding back is the one where, the only reason you had to buy into that is because you didn't know where to go with it. Well, I can't say anything more. So I'm saying is one of the nice things about sleight of mouth is that you can say, well, wait a minute, let me respond back verbally.
And
That's
by the way,
how he
how many
always
of you,
overwhelmed me in the past.
I
It was
believe
verbally.
you. Yeah.
how many of you noticed what took place here?
Put them together.
I did.
We hadn't even, I hadn't even gotten started with the sleight of mouth on this
Yeah,
stuff.
I know, but
yet.
I'm curious about something. Let's find out. Has anything changed inside?
Yeah, the thing that Robert said about, am I not important enough to invest money in myself?
That was, by the way,
That was
jumped
significant.
right up to it seems to me is that that's part of what this belief has been about, is believing. See, remember I said the first day, yesterday, that people who are successful in business do one thing. I'll tell you the one thing I've found from having modeled a lot of business people. I haven't modeled your father, but I've modeled a lot of real successful business people. I said the one thing that makes a good business head is that they believe in themselves. That's step number one. I don't care what else you know if you don't believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I say is good business. If I was to say what was, before you even came up here, I said this to the group. That's the one thing that I have found that makes good business. People believe in themselves. And I think that that's going to give you a good business.
That may be the one thing I was lacking.
Imagine if you don't have that. Yeah. And see, and if her father said, what kind of question is that to me? I'd say, yeah, see, that tells you what he doesn't think about. Yeah, what kind of question is that? I think that's a good question. It's what that one is. And I'd like to know what you think.
So why don't you go try that out inside and see what happens?
Well, I think she already did.
No, I know she did.
I think I'll do it some more.
There's slight little dialogue going on in here, yes.
What would have happened if you'd said something to like, it isn't that I'm not making money. I've always been rich. We've always had money. I'm just temporarily out of funds. And after all, Dad, you're creative, and I inherited your creative tendencies, and I'm doing creative things. So it may appear right now that I'm just temporarily out of funds. I think it goes down to an attitude. I've never been poor. I've always been rich, but there's plenty of times I've known that temporarily.
See, that's the difference between a rich person and a poor person.
Right. The only thing I'd say is that is I think that what you're just saying there is kind of more on a belief. I think that doesn't address the worthwhile issue as much. I think that that's an important thing for her to have now too, which is first of all you have to deserve to be rich. First of all you have to deserve.
You have to feel that worthwhile before you feel that.
Right. So that's what I would say.
My father said to me,
Yeah, I remember you. See ya.
So
In 9 times out of 10 belief issues, you ask a couple questions and the answer becomes apparent.
That's good.
No kidding. That's what she's saying is that It's the difference between an auditory belief that you've got installed, and so you already have that one.
We're the difference.
Yeah.
The opposite end. My father said one thing in my life when I was so young, I hardly remembered it. That's all I know about it. So I could always do anything.
Like I'm sort of the back end.
Now,
Why haven't you done more?
you mean to the Father? Yeah, but what she's asking is this. She's saying, what if you said to your father, well, look at, what if, Dad, let's say I had more money than you, then would you be happy with me? Then would you approve of me? Is kind of what you're asking. If I invested it and I had all the money in the world, would that make a difference? And see, what I'm kind of hearing you say was that somehow this money or this business success would somehow make you qualify as being a worthwhile human being, or maybe worthwhile just maybe to your father. And part of what I'm hearing you, and part of what I think your question leads to, and I think the issue is I've got to be worthwhile. And my identity is beyond belief. I've got to be worthwhile. I don't care. I mean, I'm worthwhile no matter how much money I have, no matter how rich I am, or whatever. And that seems to me to be part of that gap that you were having is, am I really a satisfactory person?
See, and the other question that would be worthwhile going after at this point in time is, what was your dad's intention in saying this?
Saying what specifically?
The whole thing about money.
That you should save your money more.
That I should be taken care of. I mean,
That you should
he
be
had a positive intent, I know that.
Okay. So he really cares about you.
Yeah.
Okay. So is your worthwhileness dependent upon money, or? See, one of the things you could do, you have some choices here, another choice. You can go and listen to your dad's words for your worthwhileness, if you're going to decide to make it dependent on an external source. Okay. Or his behavior. He makes lots of money. Or the intention. Now, which way do you want to go? Because I hear you saying that his intention and your worthwhileness really isn't a question of money.
His intention, I think, was to remind me, as he puts it, about a lack in me which he perceived, which was I was very intelligent in some areas, but didn't have much common sense. And it was in his
just
intent.
another human being, huh?
Yeah, his intent was positive. I believe that.
But see, I would say the rest of this, a lot of this other stuff at this point is almost a moot point. I mean, I think a lot of the other things will sort it out and will get themselves sorted out. That these things these are all additional things that we could do here. In my opinion, at this point, I would say the major work's already done.
I would too.
So we could go on and be creative, but I think you can see by what she was doing here.
But I don't want you to play with me anymore because I want to go away with that sentence.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I'm saying. Is
Bye.
Thank you.
Because I think
Thank
that you will have I think you have a good enough business head to use what you got. And always remember, you can keep the change. That's good business sense.
See, it comes down to a question whether you mind the pennies or mind the dollars, which take care of themselves. Now, let's find out what they got, and then we can all go home.
Okay. I have a couple of final words, of course, to close, but let's...
After.
Yeah.
Okay, I have this problem. See, at the end of every seminar, I like to find out what people got out of it. And what we need to do is take a sentence or two from each person as to what is going to be useful and you're taking home with you. Now, we already know about Linda. So, if we can go around the room real quickly, but you're going to have to speak up loud so we can get it on the microphone, be helpful. Karen.
A deeper understanding of NLP.
Okay. We'll do it this way. Deeper understanding of NLP. Good.
God.
I got more of an understanding of the power of language and the power of beliefs, and just a lot of ideas of some things to play with.
I think the only thing that's really in my conscious mind is the first morning, the triangle and the square and the circle, and I think that's what I'll use more than anything, consciously anyway.
I got a lot of good techniques how to use both in my classroom and just in daily life, talking to people and getting along with people.
Well, I got a billion more little bits. I got a billion more little chunks and another organizing gestalt for, this information. That's what it feels like.
I learned some new ways to reframe.
I got a lot of structure for things which seemed very familiar and will begin to fall into place.
I got a lot on how to negotiate between people.
I got about 10 more ways to meta-comment, and I think a deeper understanding of what belief systems are about.
As usual, I found a little more about myself, which seems to make it easier to understand other people.
I got a lot of definitions and more skills in communication.
I got a better idea of how to go from macro to micro and back again with facility.
I got some insights into some behaviors and maybe how to effectively change my own belief systems and help others.
Got a lot of information on how to recognize belief systems and do something about accommodating them within my own belief systems.
I got confused about my beliefs.
Now the question is, what new ones are you going to put in?
I think I'm finally starting to see some sense to this.
Well, I got some assistance in negotiation, and also the last belief that was just worked on helped me a lot, personally.
More clarity, more clarity for NLP as a whole, and belief systems were really helpful, and also just friendships. I met some really neat people along with the ones I already know. Thanks.
I got a wonderful organizational tool and a lot more choice in the responses I make to clients.
New ways to resolve conflicts and a belief that I really can chunk up. There is more choices in reframing and negotiating.
A little more understanding about what NLP is, and redefining and consequences were very helpful to me. I really appreciated that. And meeting Robert was the highlight. Thank you, Robert.
I got a better understanding of why I feel more comfortable with myself, that I'm beginning to live my own beliefs that have always been there versus what other people told me my beliefs about me were. I also got some more tools to manipulate myself a husband.
Well, in addition to what I just demonstrated getting, I got a clear understanding of this whole idea called sleight of mouth, which I enjoyed, met some really nice people, and played with some I already liked.
By the way, as people are answering, think about some of the mathematics that's working out all the time. You'll hear interesting pieces of information.
I got more structure and more confusion simultaneously, and I'm always glad to have more of Robert in any form.
The big picture became clearer through the specificity of language.
many things, but the thing that sticks in my mind right now is that pacing is important in communication, and from a business sense, that's real important to me. Thanks.
I got a lot of useful experience out of this program. I've heard about Sleight of Mouth for 2.5 years, and it's really good to see it and actually use it, and seemed to be really successful because I was, it happened that I seemed to follow what Robert had done.
It seems that I got permission somehow to use these skills to help clients. Also, a better understanding of the importance of maybe giving myself credit when I come up with an idea or an intuition in therapy. So it's helpful that way for me.
This was my first experience with NLP. I learned a lot about it, and I learned a new vocabulary.
I learned how to chunk down.
I learned how to go for the identity quicker, where I am along the line and what I want to get to. So that was really useful. Thank you, Robert.
Expanded my belief on what I thought Sleight of Mouth was all about, and that's specific.
I got a structure for understanding what I do intuitively, as well as a method for when I train trainers in the business world and they meet people who are resistant to the training, a way to quickly give them tools that I see other master trainers using, like Robert and like Ed, etc. So that's a nice benefit for me.
I've got a much stronger belief about the importance of beliefs.
I had never done any NLP work before this weekend either, and I'm even more curious than I was before.
I gained more options in language, and just, I guess I'm seeing the bigger picture also, and as I move into other fields and other varieties of communication with people, that option is going to be real beneficial for me.
I think I see a new way to add humor to conversational change.
Okay, we were caught in a chair now. All right, first of all, I was glad to meet Robert and to experience, what he had to offer. And I feel very, and everyone that I've met and talked to, is really nice to share this time with you. And I just feel that so much of what I've read and so much of what I've got is much more integrated now. It makes a lot more sense to me. And thank you again, Robert.
It clarified what was dawning on me about the structure of how to go about confusing friends and influencing people, and how to be charming, and how to be very congruent and respectful in the process of doing it.
Everyone went? That's it. That's
Bring it
all.
around this way.
All right, Ed.
Thank you. Well, now that my agenda is complete, we'll go back to yours.
Okay. Well, I guess kind of what I'd like to do is to review over the things that we talked about, and talking about, I guess, as part of what this process was and was designed for. We started off by saying that language is one of those things that makes human beings unique. I think language is one of those things that allows us to be creative, and also, I think, as some of you found, language can be limiting as well. Our question is, what are the structures of language that can limit us or that can empower us? I don't think that language is just words. I think that language is its own form of reality. And I think that some of the things you experienced also tend to confirm that. In the Structure of Magic, Volume 1, Grinder and Bandler said that the language was a model of the world. Not just a way of describing a model, but in and of itself, it can become a model of the world. And I think in the same way that a set of words can have a reality that is powerful enough to influence you, even though it doesn't fit with what you see or what you feel, is a statement to that fact. And that language, since it's in a way... Oh, is it not on? Yeah, it's on. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Language, in a way... Thank you. Sorry. Since it is the most evolutionary recent, is also in some ways the part of our experience that we least understand. And while in a lot of the other NLP courses you learn how to change your visual submodalities and you learn sensory observational skills, which I think are incredibly important and that are going to be an extremely useful and important tool to make sure that you balance your sleight of mouth. Using sleight of mouth in and of itself will get you nowhere, except into arguments. However, using language in addition with the other powerful tools that you have in terms of observing is going to be very important. And what we wanted to do is to identify some of the structure of how language worked, how it gets its power as its own reality, sort of saying that language doesn't have to be logical. It doesn't have to fit with what you see, and it can still be powerful. The ways in which we explored that were how language can create meanings by creating categories. In my own personal experience, I remember a time when John Grinder, one of the early classes that I went to, I was talking about how I walked into this class 12 years ago. One of the assignments that he gave in the next class that I had with him was one that I will not forget. It was an assignment where he said, find something that you've never really paid much attention to before and name it. And notice how it changes your perception. Just make up a name for it and notice how it changes your perception. And in going up and talking to him afterwards, I was saying, well, what kind of things would you, are you interested in? Or, we're just kind of talking about it. At a certain point, my eyes shifted over and to the left. And he said, well, what about that? And I said, what? He said, your eyes just went over. Your eyes just moved. I said, tried to figure out, well, what was going on? And I kind of felt that I'd gone inside, almost into a little trance state. So I kind of named it minimal cues, trance cues of how people put themselves, anchored themselves into a little bit of a trance. And began to go out, and suddenly the most amazing thing happened. It was like scales fell from my eyes. And there I was, sort of seeing this whole world in front of me that had always been there. I never noticed it until I gave it a name. And that information, incidentally, later developed into what is known as the NLP eye movements, NLP accessing cues. Back in those days, I was just noticing everything that people did. Snap their fingers, tap their head, click their tongues, blink their eyes. It gave me a lot of wonderful things to do in classes where if I was getting bored, I could go and look at people and notice that somebody would be listening to the teacher. And you could see how big of a chunk of information they were taking in by their eye blinks. So the person would be sitting there and the guy would be talking, chunk, chunk, and the teacher would make a mistake or stumble upon a word and the person would go, chunk, chunk. And you could actually watch how much of a chunk of information a person was storing by how fast they blinked their eyes. Anyway, the whole world opened up to me. And I said, well, that's a pretty interesting thing. That's the power of modeling, the power of the word, the power of language. However, as we also know, that language can categorize things in ways that limit us, in ways that reduce our experience as opposed to enrich it and empower it. So what we've been exploring here is, what are the ways? I like the fact that some of you said you could have permission to use these. Language is not the word in the sense of, that it's something that you have to respond to, that you can't speak back, and have creative, and as Edmund said, both respectful as well as humorous, charming, and intelligent tools by which you can respond to things that people say that allow you to open up the belief, not to make them wrong, nor to give in. And that's what meta is all about. And the kind of things that we explored were chains of meaning, chains of causes, and how causes can get set up with language. One of the things that many of the philosophers pointed out is that cause and effect is not really something that you can observe in the world. You notice that two things happen near each other, but cause and effect is a complete human construction. You really can't tell that something really caused something else. You can't observe it. All you can see is that two events happened in the same space and time, and cause is actually something that we put to it, which I think is a very powerful sort of way of thinking of what language can do. When I say this causes that, I've suddenly made a reality. We also talked about comparing. Comparisons to what? Rich compared to what? We talked about the kind of levels of experience, that language can appeal to these different levels of being, whether it's specific behaviors, capabilities, identities. We've gone over some specific patterns for how to accomplish some of the kind of empowering changes or option-opening changes. The fact that a number of you mentioned humor, I think, is good, because humor is a state that occurs when suddenly you learn something. One of the most fascinating things I remember about watching Moshe Feldenkrais's work was that he pointed out that when people really learned something, like I remember seeing a video where he was working with a child, this is the interesting thing about beliefs, who had cerebral palsy, and his legs were being pulled together, like, they rubbed together, and he couldn't walk very well. 3 different surgeons had told the parents that the only way to deal with that, the only way for him to walk without damaging his legs, would be to cut the adductor muscles on his legs, which would then make them, of course, they would atrophy and become useless. So he would lose something. Within 20 minutes, confusion of the same logical type, actually. Feldenkrais had this young man walking with his legs open, just by touching and moving and kind of doing a kinesthetic sleight of mouth, I would call it. And one of the things that happened, there was a certain point when all of a sudden that child started laughing. And you knew that he'd suddenly figured something out that he didn't know. And Feldenkrais said, that's right, you should laugh when you learn something important. That's the state that you want to attach to it. And I think in a way, humor and the whole idea of beliefs fitting in with humor and moving around there is something that's really important. So we learned some things about going to consequences, intentions, applying to self, metaframes, the various kinds of places that you can go to respond or frame a belief. Now, in doing this kind of work, I have a little metaphor I'd like to kind of give you at the end of this program. I have a couple of things I'd like to say, but first one is a metaphor about a young fellow who was learning drafting. And he went to study drafting, and he had this drafting was something that was really important to him, because he felt that drafting was one of those things that was kind of an expression of what was really fully creative in people. For example, you took something that was a dream, a complete idea in somebody's mind, had no physical existence whatsoever, and you represented it. You made a map out of it. And from that map, somebody could actually take that and make and manifest that thing in the world. And I believe all map-making functions are that way. So as an aside here, I believe that NLP is not a bunch of techniques for communication. NLP is tools for dreamers. NLP is tools that allow you to take things that are just conceptions and forge them into a map that allows you to manifest them physically in the world. That's what creativity and genius is all about, in my opinion. And this young fellow was able, he got that, and he had so many dreams that he wanted to manifest in terms of the kind of things that he saw in his mind. And so he went and he learned in this class, and he learned all about things like how important it was, if you're going to build a house, to have a good map. The map needed to represent things not only in the small details, but it needed to represent the whole picture. That you needed to be able to look at that house from the front and the top and the side and without the roof on it and see the schematics. That there was a whole lot of ways which to look at this particular thing in order to manifest it, to make it real. You couldn't just look at it from one point of view and have somebody build it. That reality was representing things from a lot of different perspectives. He also learned that once you have the map, you need to have a good construction crew. You can have the best plans in the world, but if you have an incompetent crew or people that are not trained, then there's going to be problems. He also learned that not only do you need a good construction crew and a good map, but you had to have good materials to work with. You could have a wonderful construction crew, people that were very capable. You could have a wonderful map, but if you used poor materials, that building would be weak, no matter how good the people were or the map was. And also, that the environment was important. If you, as the people in Los Angeles learned, you could build a wonderful building right on a fault line, and the world will find fault with your construction. And so he learned about all of these things, and he realized the relationships of how to put all of those things together to design. And all the different perspectives, the different issues, the different elements. And when it came at the end of that class, for him to take his final, he was so excited. He built the biggest dream that he had, and he wanted to really show his thing of so much that he learned. Problem was, when he sat down, class started, it was time for him to do the test. He kind of looked at the paper, and all these ideas came rushing in, the different perspectives, the environment, the crew, the materials, all the different things. These little chunks came shooting out at the same time, and he basically went blank. The teacher came by, and having noticed this person staring blankly at his paper for 5 minutes, said, "Can I help you?" The young fellow tried to explain, "Oh, I have all these ideas running. I do know the material. It's so important to me. I want to be able to express myself." Well, the teacher just kind of looked at him for a moment and said, "Well," went over to his paper, picked up his pencil, and drew a square in the middle of his paper. He said, "What about that?" The fellow said, "Well, you can't have a square. First of all, the idea for the building I had wasn't square. It had a couple of wings, and this was rounded, and this needed this kind of thing." And of course, you look at it from this angle, and of course, within a few moments, all of the information was beginning to pour out onto the paper. And I think that that's a very important principle to keep in mind for yourself. If you're going to work with beliefs, you're going to work with people. The goal is not to have all this information and try and manifest it. The goal is to have that all as a background, as a structure, and to take the simplest step possible at first. As Albert Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not any simpler. And so you start with the most simple as possible maneuver, and people will let you know. If you have feedback, they'll let you know. It's one of the things you might want to use as you learn to apply these things. My goal here is not necessarily been able to give you a complete cognitive understanding of all the definitions of sleight of mouth. It's been to provide a structure by which you can build your own intuitions. And when you work, I recommend that you work intuitively. The structures are there to build intuitions, not to substitute for them. Second thing about beliefs is one of my favorite stories is about Albert Einstein, where somebody asked him, they said, "Well, Dr. Einstein, you've probably one of the most bona fide geniuses of our century. Your span of thought has encompassed everything from the atom to the entire cosmos. You're a humanitarian, a scientist, a great thinker. What is the most important question do you think is facing humanity today?" And Einstein kind of looked off up into space for a moment, and then he looked down at the ground in front of him. Big chunks, little chunks, what can I say? And he looked back at the reporter and said, "I think the most important question facing humanity is the universe a friendly place?" That belief is the most important one to start from. If we believe that the universe is an unfriendly place, then we're going to use our knowledge, we're going to use our map-making abilities, we're going to use our technology to create tools that destroy and wall out that unfriendliness. If you believe that the universe is just a chaos, that it's neither friendly nor unfriendly, then you're a victim to the toss of the dice. There's no meaning. I mean, you're just kind of getting by, and you have a random existence. It doesn't matter what you do, what your tools are. If, on the other hand, you believe that the universe is a friendly place, then what you're going to find is that you'll be using your maps, your technologies, your knowledge to create tools for understanding that universe, because it's through understanding it, understanding the structure, that you will have safety and power. So believing that it's friendly doesn't mean you're automatically safe. You do need power. You do need to protect yourself. But if you believe it's friendly, understanding will come through protection. Protection will come through understanding, both. And I kind of, at the end of a program like this, I think it's sort of important. I have some of my own personal, kind of a personal thing that, and we talk about sleight of mouth and reality this and reality that. And I know in myself the idea of beliefs and the idea of having some of these levels to go to respond to is very important. Many of you know I work with beliefs in health, and a number of you know, either from seeing the tape or hearing me talk about it, that my mother had cancer, a recurrence of breast cancer about 5 years ago, and we had a very poor prognosis and all that, but was able to, basically, at this point today, she's in complete remission, and without the use of chemotherapy, drugs, or radiation, that kind of thing. And I think it was very powerful. It was sort of the start of what got me into thinking about beliefs, certainly in terms of beliefs in health, and some of the kind of things that we've explored here are those kinds of changes of perception. Another story that I haven't really told very much, but I think it's equally as important, is about my father. And we're kind of talking about parents. And about 2 years ago, my father suffered a major stroke. He'd been working on making a lot of changes in himself. He'd smoked for a number of years and quit smoking, was losing weight. Was finally, he'd talk about being successful in business. He'd always, was a patent attorney, he'd always worked for other people, and had just finished the most successful year of his life, and suddenly had a major stroke. And found out about it and went to the hospital, and they didn't expect him to make it through the day. I mean, his whole right side of his body was completely paralyzed, blind. They didn't think that he was conscious. And we all got in there, and I tried all the various things, pacing and leading and using beliefs, and he survived the first day. And they thought it was a miracle. It's quite interesting. But the particular kind of issue that he had was when you have that big of a stroke, your body tries to heal it. And the paradox is that when it tries to heal it, it starts to swell. Swelling is a part of healing. The problem with your brain is that since it's inside of a nice bony box there that doesn't stretch, when you swell, your skin swells, but your brain, your skull doesn't do that. So it starts to push your brain down through. As you swells, pushes it down through your bottom part of your skull, which makes all kinds of terrible things happen. Your body doesn't regulate right anymore, and all kinds of things. Anyway, to make an interesting but long story short, after 4 or 5 days of being up all night, trying everything I could think of, and working, there came a point where we wanted to be able to get some kind of a sign from my father that he was conscious, because they kept kind of saying, well, he's not paying any attention. An interesting thing happened. All of a sudden, in asking him, my sister, my mother, and I were there, all of a sudden he reached out with his left hand, because he couldn't, his right side was completely paralyzed, and he had some movement in his left, and he grabbed me behind the head and pulled me down to his ear, pulled my ear down to his mouth, and he said something. I thought it was hi. In retrospect, it might have been bye. I don't know. But then, in the situation where, this was a man that was, my father was a big man. He wasn't like me in the stature, in a sense. He was a barrel-chested person, a huge person. Here he was, his bodily functions were so impaired, he couldn't urinate on his own. He was blind, supposedly unconscious. Began to feel around with his left hand, and he grabbed my sister's hand. He couldn't see. Completely, his body is just a shell. And he put that on top of his hand. And then he reached around and he grabbed my mother's hand. And he put that on top of her hand. He grabbed my hand and he put that on top of his. And he put his on top of all of them. And that was basically the last conscious act that he had before his brain died, basically. And, and when you get down to these questions of is the universe a friendly place or not, we did have to decide, well, do you keep them on life support or not? And that's where I tell you that you're not going to be able to look in your checkbook and decide, well, should we let this, should we keep this life support apparatus on or not? you're not going to be able to look to somebody's accessing cues or representational systems. There's only one place you're going to go, and that's going to be to what you believe about the world. And this is where you find that those questions about is the universe a friendly place is something that's not just sleight of mouth. It's something that is going to resonate all through you and through the universe, if you want to speak that way. And we did decide to take the apparatus off, and they were afraid that maybe he would keep living, you know, kind of thing. However, he died quite peacefully. And when I think about it, and I think about, well, and beliefs in health and all of this stuff, what you wonder, okay, is the universe a friendly place? Is this a tragedy? What is this? And for my own part, and I think reason I'm telling this story is about the beliefs, and it's obviously a really personal thing for me, but when I think about what I would like to do and the kind of person I'd like to be, and what I'd like to use my belief skills or my NLP skills or all the things that I've learned in life, if I had the guts and the presence of mind and the ability to do what he did in the last moment of my life, with my body broken and my consciousness basically all but gone, that would make it all worth it. If I could use my NLP to be able to do that, that would make it worth it to me. And that's the kind of thing I think about when I think about what is the what to be able to kind of draw into the deepest places inside of you and do that. And in that way, I think regarding beliefs, some of the most important things that I've learned in life learned a lot of things from my mother by her living, and a lot of things from my father by his dying. And when it comes down to beliefs, I think that those are some of the kind of issues that are important to address. And as you take your tools of sleight of mouth and you think about beliefs, what they mean in terms of words, what they mean in terms of your lives, I think that you might find, and I hope that maybe you find someday, that some belief thing that you've learned here or some structure or some understanding can help provide you with a way to utilize, to accept, to deal with situations like that and to learn from them in the most full ways that are possible for you. I want to thank you for all your participation in this. Sleight of mouth is one of those things that's not it's not completely structured like teaching six-step reframing, so it involves a lot of work on your part, and I appreciate you being willing to put out that effort. And I hope that you get back in full proportion the amount of effort that you put into this in terms of results and learning and changes for yourselves. So on that, I'd like to say thank you and good night, and may we meet again.